Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Claire Melamed of the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, the Honorable Alan Davidson of the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, and John Giusti of the GSMA Foundation.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. This is going to be a great conversation. My name is Claire Melamed, and I'm the CEO of the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. We are a network of about 700 organizations who are all focused on how data and technology can help to drive progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. So the topics that we're talking about today are very close to my heart. I also want to congratulate the Concordia team on a fabulous bit of scheduling, because everything that we're talking about data and technology in particular, the mobile technologies, AI, digital, all depend on energy. And I think we don't talk about that connection often enough between some of the different agendas that we're talking about here. So absolutely delighted to be following a panel that really focused on that critical challenge of energy that underpins also everything that we're going to be talking about today. I'm delighted to be sharing the stage today with two absolute experts in the field who have huge experience and I'm sure some great stories to share with us today. So John Giusti, on my far right here, is the Chief Regulatory Officer of GSMA and the head of the GSMA Foundation. And Alan Davidson is the administrator of the National Telecommunications and Information Administration here in the US. Now, I've spent the last couple of days down the street at the UN, where there are two conversations going on. One is, frankly, quite a pessimistic conversation about the many, many challenges that we face in the world and some of the failures, both at a national level and multilaterally, in really addressing those challenges in a way that meets the urgency of the moment. But then there's another conversation which is hugely optimistic about the promise of new technologies, some amazing, amazing demos I've seen about some of the really tangible way that mobile technology, that AI is right now helping to accelerate progress. And our job today on this panel is to bring those two conversations together, to have a sober conversation about the challenges, but an optimistic one also about the power of human ingenuity and innovation to meet those challenges. So John, let me turn to you first. So GSMA, as I'm sure everyone here knows, has been working for many years on some really fantastic projects that have brought the power of mobile to improve lives around the world, and especially, of course, in low and middle income countries. So I'd love to hear a bit from you about what you've learned, particularly about how mobile technologies can help with one of the major challenges that's faced by governments everywhere that we'll hear about a lot more, I'm sure, in the days to come, to accelerate economic growth and provide jobs, especially, of course, for young people.
No, thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here. And I think, you know, one of the things, when we first started talking about the SDGs years back, we were a little bit concerned initially that we didn't call out connectivity very specifically. But over time, it's really become clear that it's underpinning all aspects, all 17 goals. And I think when you're looking at economic opportunity, I think what we're really trying to do as an industry and in partnership with government and international organizations is leverage the reach. Currently we have 5.6 billion people who use mobile services around the world. We have 57% of the world's population already connected to the mobile internet. We have 96% of the world's population covered by mobile broadband. So a huge opportunity to leverage that reach. And I think it's really super important because as we start to see the impact that the reach has already had, we now have 3 billion people with access to financial services who didn't have them before. And that allows them to participate in the economy and provides opportunity for growth. I think also, of course, when we look at, when you're looking at small businesses, middle-sized businesses, and especially in emerging economies, what is the opportunity that comes with that? And our research shows that those companies actually grow at a rate twice as fast as those that are not connected, and actually grow jobs 8 times as fast. So this is not speculative. There is real opportunity if we can get more people connected, and I think that's the real challenge for us now. A huge number of people are covered by mobile internet and not using it. How do we get the rest of them connected?
Thank you. And to answer that question, who better than to turn to Alan, who, I know that from talking to you earlier, that NTIA has done some amazing work in bridging that divide in the US. So tell us what lessons you think we can learn from your work to meet this global challenge.
Well, thanks for the question, and it's great to be here today. Thanks to our organizers. The starting point for us is that the internet is now the essential communications medium of this modern digital economy. Yet here we are in 2024, and it is amazing that there are millions and millions of families across America, 2.6 billion people around the world, who still do not have that basic access that they need to this essential technology, enabled by energy, by the way, right? So how do we deal with that? We've been talking about the digital divide in this country, in the US, for over 25 years. The Biden-Harris administration is investing, thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law, over $90 billion to connect everybody. It's a very simple but ambitious goal that the president has given us: connect everybody in America by the end of this decade with reliable, affordable, high-speed internet service. And we are on track to meet that goal, and that's very exciting. You asked about lessons learned for us from this project, and it is a project that really impacts people. And I think the 3 quick lessons I would say we could take away from this. One is, we're going to need every tool in the toolbox. So we're fiber forward. We're trying to get as much fiber deployment out there as we can, but wireless mobile is going to be a huge part of this, fixed wireless technologies, and low Earth orbit satellite. I'd say a second big lesson is that space is going to play a big role here, and that's one of the interesting things I could take away from this last weekend, even talking about the SDGs, has been the role that space-based communication can play. These low Earth orbit satellite constellations are going to deliver very high-speed internet service. We're also seeing direct from handset to satellite communications, and these are technologies that are really going to change people's lives. The third thing I'd say is, it's not just about, one of the big lessons we learned, it's not just about access, right? What we've seen is you can bring a connection to somebody's home, but if they can't afford to use it, if they don't have the device they need to use it, if they don't have the skills they need to get online, that connection doesn't do a lot of good. So we are investing a lot in our digital equity work to make sure we're thinking about access, and I think one of the things we've got to do globally is make sure people have the tools and the skills as well as the access.
Thank you, and I think you're absolutely right. It's that interface between the technology and the markets and policy that actually affect how people access it, which is key, and we will absolutely come back to that. John, we've heard a lot this week about, and from the previous panel, in fact, about the importance of public-private partnerships in driving change. GSMA, obviously, works with all of the mobile operators across the world. And what role and responsibility do you think mobile operators have in helping us to deliver some of these changes, to achieve some of the global goals we're hearing about at the UN this week?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that, the reality is they're in the markets. They're in every country in the world. And they know that their employees are from those markets, their customers are from those markets. So they know they want to deliver benefits for those markets. And so I think really they're doing everything they can. We've seen huge growth in the investment and the closing of any coverage gaps. But I think one of the things that we all see as a big problem right now that cannot be solved just by the operators alone, and therefore requiring partnership with the government, with civil society, with international organizations, is the fact that you have a huge number of people, and Alan just touched on this. It's not that people aren't necessarily covered. They either can't afford it or they can't use it. And if that's happening in the US, imagine in low and middle income countries. So I think one of the things we're really focused on at the GSMA is, I mentioned 57% of the people are connected to the mobile internet. That's great. But that means 43% aren't. So how can we get that vast majority of people who are covered using? And I think one of the things we're focused on is affordability. And I think when we talk affordability, the practical reality is the biggest barrier is device affordability. So we've convened a coalition of industry, so mobile operators, device manufacturers, the World Bank, the ITU, and other stakeholders together to figure out what can we do to move the needle forward. It's pretty clear that there's only so much leeway within the device manufacturing itself. But when we do the research, a huge chunk of the cost over 30% on average, if you look in Latin America, Africa, South Asia, is import duty and tax. But with the right commitment, we can address that. And I think the other thing, and we have a great partnership right now with the World Bank and the IFC, is looking at de-risking the financing. Because of course, even the lower end devices, people have to pay for them over time. How can people feel comfortable that they can take that risk in getting that out into the market? I think the second piece is the skills. There's a huge number of people who just simply don't feel comfortable using digital services. And so we've developed a free resource in partnership with our donors in the foundation, Mobile Internet Skills Training Toolkit. And this is something really focused on getting people to have the skills they need. We're also in a partnership with some of the mobile agents in markets to sort of train them up and get them able to move to the next phase of use of the mobile internet. So I would say skills and affordability are something that cut across all markets, and that we have to work in partnership, because one company, one industry is not going to be able to solve this problem of this scale.
Absolutely, affordability of devices. I mean, another thing that we hear a lot is about the affordability of the data itself. And I think there's a number of different elements there of affordability.
I mean, it could be a chicken or egg, right? Because of course, first you have the device, and then maybe you have to solve that issue. But
Absolutely. So, Alan, coming back now to one of certainly the hot topics of the week. I know that NTIA has been an integral part of this administration's effort to promote a responsible pro-innovation policy approach to AI, a challenge which many governments are grappling with. And how are you thinking about policy approaches to the AI governance challenges that societies everywhere are facing?
I guess no conversation about technology is complete without a conversation about AI.
Yeah, we'd be
right?
booted off the stage if we didn't mention AI at some point.
And it has been a big topic already this week, and for good reason, right? The starting point for us is the notion that responsible AI innovation is really going to make people's lives better. And there are a lot of reasons for optimism. And in fact, even just talking about the SDGs, of course, I saw a recent statistic that only 17% of the SDGs are on track, but that AI and machine learning tools can actually be of assistance in accelerating 80% of them. So there is this feeling like even on the goals that we have, the AI systems that we're building, particularly around machine learning and generative AI, can make a really big difference in people's lives, and we're already starting to see this transformation happen across the economy. Not surprisingly, governments are moving with urgency, as is, I think, industry and civil society appropriately, probably faster than we've seen in many years in previous generations of technology. And US government's doing its part. We have a big executive order out about this. We're working with our international partners. Of course, it's been a big theme here as well, and it will be this week. One big idea around AI that we are embracing is around openness. And I'll just say very quickly, my organization, NTIA, put out a report earlier this summer about openness in AI, and the question of what we think of as sort of open source and open model weight systems. And the reason it's an important issue, because on the one hand, there's been anxiety about how do we control these models and make sure they're not being used in harmful ways. But we also want to make sure, we know that openness in the past in the software has been really important for democratizing access to technology. We want to make sure that it's not just a small set of companies that control access to all of the important models that are being built. So our report talks about how we can embrace openness while continuing to monitor risks. I think that's going to be a really important theme and topic as we think about how to make sure that AI is accessible all around the world.
Thank you so much. Now, I see from the monitor in front of me that we only have a couple of minutes now between you and your lunch. But I'd like to end on an optimistic note. We have actually had quite an optimistic panel by the standards of this week, I have to say. And hear from both of you, perhaps starting with you, John, about what are you most excited about in terms of either technology innovations or policy innovations or what we're seeing in the private sector as we think about the next generation of technologies, AI, and how we can accelerate progress?
I mean, to me, what I'm most excited about, to be frank, is this recognition. It probably came out of the negative experience of the pandemic, but there's never been a greater recognition on the importance of digital access to people's lives and livelihoods. So I think that this focus of government and understanding that there needs to be a connection between digital ambitions and their digital regulations and policies is sort of a new concept. Now, we're not there. There's still a disconnect. But I think we now have the opportunity to work together between government, between industry, and make sure we have the right frameworks in place to make sure we have sustainable investment going forward in the infrastructure we need for AI and every other opportunity coming the way.
Thank you.
It's interesting you mentioned the pandemic, because I think the pandemic was very much a driver for a lot of the effort to create more access in the US. I think that AI is actually, and access to AI is going to be something that drives the next decade of our desire to make sure that, and recognition about how important it is to bridge the digital divide. And if there's one thing that gives me some optimism, there's a huge amount of work to do, as you say, particularly around AI, and particularly making sure that we are getting ahead of the very real risks. We will not realize the promise of AI without getting ahead of it, but that this conversation is happening relatively early, and that young people are actually a big part of it, as we heard earlier today. And we've lived through a few generations of change in internet technology, cloud computing, social media. I'd argue we were behind in each of those. We're still working as governments, as industry and civil society to figure out the right solutions in those spaces on policy. We are still very early in the AI revolution, and it is really important and good to see that we are all having these conversations. That's what gives me hope, is that we're having these conversations early, because the choices are ours about what kinds of technology we want to build and deploy. And having these conversations together lets us get ahead and make choices to deploy AI in ways that are going to benefit people.
Thank you. And let me say, I'm really pleased to be here, particularly working in partnership with GSMA, because it's through mobile technology is the delivery mechanism for a lot of the things that we're most excited about, for AI and so on. So this conversation about handsets, about connectivity, this is how most people in the world are going to access all of these new technologies. So I think this is where we can get to that point about democratization and closing the divide. So I want to thank you both very much for a fantastic conversation. Wish you all a good lunch break and enjoy the rest of your event. Thank you very much indeed.